Hey guys, before this video begins, I just want to let you know that this is supposed to have been one big video, but it took so much content and there was so much going into this video that when I put it into the editor, I realized it was way too long and it had to be broken up into 3 different parts. What you're seeing here is the first of 3 different videos that are all back to back lined up, so you can take a break between each segment, and if you make a decision whether or not you want to continue to find out more about the differences between the Lectric XP and the Bolton Blackbird. And I'll see you in the video. Hey there e-bike fans, in this video I'm not only going to be doing a comparison between the Lectric XP and the Bolton Blackbird, because I know some of you are thinking that can't even be a fair comparison. This is actually a video for more of educational purposes. For those of you who are looking for a bike and not familiar with what e-bikes are and what the differences are between them, this is the type of video I wished I had when I was doing my research, and that's why I'm making this video. So even though this is a versus type of video, I'm going to be going over the benefits and the pros and the cons between the two of these that we have here. And that will hopefully give you a better idea of what you might want to be looking for in your own bike, what you might want to be spending on it. And these are big investments, so I hope that this will be helpful for you and help you to make the right decision, and one that you won't regret. In most cases, I don't think most people regret their decisions on buying these bikes, but lately I've been seeing a lot of posts about people wanting to sell their bikes and the different reasons. I'll be covering some of that in the video ahead, but in the meantime, this is the Lectric XP versus the Bolton Blackbird, the differences of the bikes, and let's get started. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of all the different close-ups and the different differences of the parts that we have on here, I first want to say that this is going to be one of those longer videos. I already know it before I even begin. It's because there's going to be a lot to explain about the differences of the two different bikes. Now, I want to start with the Lectric XP because I know this is one of, if not the most popular selling bike on the planet at this time. And I had the privilege of speaking actually to Levi, the owner or one of the founders of Lectric XP, or the Lectric e-bike company, and there were some really cool insights that I heard about it. And I'm a big fan of both these companies, the Bolton company and also the Lectric e-bike company. And what I got a chance to really hear is the passion behind the Lectric e-bike company and the mission statement that they had, and get a better understanding of what they decided to build. And maybe that kind of understanding will help you decide on if this is a bike for you. Now, the other bike I want to point out here is we're going to be talking about the Bolton Blackbird. And this is the bike where I feel had every component that I thought I wanted after doing my hours and hours and hours of research and hundreds of YouTube video views and just writing down everything that I was looking for. The value that I got out of this bike, or I thought I was going to be getting, was just dead on the best thing out there for a high performance bike. Now, I don't need 2 bikes. The reason why I ended up with 2 is because when I ordered the Blackbird, it was going to take a lot longer than I expected. And then I felt, well, I might as well get started on riding something. So I asked my wife if she'd be interested in getting a bike so that when I get my Blackbird, she can come riding with me. She's actually only ridden this bike for about 5 minutes after the months that we've had it. And this is one of the first things I want to point out between the 2 bikes. And this is the reason why I want to start before going into the nitty-gritty of this, is there are a lot of reasons why people are beginning to sell their bikes. Right? Regardless if it's an XP, regardless if it's a Blackbird, both of these bikes are actually being sold all over the place right now. There are owners that actually have found that they're too much bike for them. Let's start with this bike here. My wife has ridden bikes. She is comfortable with riding a regular bicycle, but she rode it only recreational, maybe in her little driveway, maybe once occasionally they'd be taken to the park to ride around. But it's a little different than someone like myself who actually grew up riding a bike pretty much from the time I was in the 3rd grade, maybe 2nd grade, all the way until I was about 14 or 15. I was still riding road bikes and going on long distances, and I was a newspaper boy from the 4th grade all the way to like 9th grade in high school, and I was delivering paper every day. So we had various different bikes. I spent all of my money on mountain bike, on a street bike, on a BMX bike, multiple BMX bikes. So we had all of the, I have a lot of different experiences riding different types of bikes, whereas she has just recreational experience time here and there. So a bike like this, first jumping out with the power that has become on almost any e-bike, can be very intimidating and very scary. So with that, That's one of the reasons why I decided I wanted to go ahead and address some of the ways that you might want to be looking at these bikes, because when you watch other people ride it, you may not realize how much experience they have and what difference it makes on how comfortable they feel on the bike. With the Lectric XP, this is a very powerful bike. It is also a very economical bike, and it is a bike that actually needs, in fact, all e-bikes need to be given a lot of respect even at its price. The Blackbird, at now selling for about $2,600, is a higher performance bike. It is a bike that has a ton of power, but it is also larger, and it has a lot more skill needed, in my opinion, to get used to the bike faster. Even as much as I know about bikes, this bike can go fast enough where it actually is, I wouldn't say too fast for me, but it is where I have to be extra cautious on what I'm doing and why I'm going that fast and where I'm doing it. These two actually have completely different parts, components, and that's where we're going to go into the differences on where you might want to start your research on how you want your bike to be put together. Because with so many different companies doing great jobs making bikes out there right now, you can pretty much find the bike that you're looking for if you make a list of all the components you think you might want on it, and then start doing a comparison of different prices. So for instance, if you are looking for a foldable 20-inch bike and you know that you want one that can go at least up to 20 miles an hour, then you can actually start making your list there. If you don't need it to go that fast, then you can actually make your list there. And then price points will make the big difference. So what I've been finding is you will basically get what you pay for in a lot of differences in the price ranges that are coming up in the market out there. So a $2,600 bike versus a $1,900 bike, there are going to be component differences, and you'll get the pricing increases based on a lot of times the parts that are going to be on there. Now, does it need to be a premium part versus a standard part? That's really up to you. Both have very good benefits to it. Some will last longer, some will shift smoother, some will have more power, some will have better displays. There's all these different readings, and we're going to be going into all of that. That's why I said this is going to be a long video. So hopefully you stick with me. I'll try to put the chapter marks of the different things that we're talking about. But for that's going to be the first starting point to understand where we're going to be going in these two videos. I know. So let's go ahead and get started in some of the components. Okay, so I want to be talking about the first thing people will say and makes it so that these two are not really a comparison. It's because of the tire size that we have on both of these. Now, the Lectric XP has a very common 20-inch diameter by a 4-inch thickness of a tire, whereas this Blackbird is actually, it's not a very common size, but it's a 24-inch diameter with a 4-inch wide tire. And the more common size for fat bikes, they are actually 26-inch tires. And the reason why I'm sticking with the fat tires is because I found when looking at my reviews that a lot of people have said that the fat tires add a lot more comfort to the ride because of the width of the tires, which is completely true. You can soften these tires and you'll get a lot more cushion on your ride, and it absorbs a lot of the different bumps. One thing I want to make sure that you understand is, though, even though it says it's a 24-inch tire, if we put a yardstick in the backside and we measure the diameter, you see that it's practically at about a 26-inch. Because of the actual thickness of the tire coming out, it's actually added 2 more inches to really see the size. And this one here, you will see, even though this is 20-inch, it's about 22.5 or so. The big difference between this is, of course, the rotation of the tires will be a lot faster on a smaller bike, and the faster you go. And then it actually helps to provide a little more torque. But with the torque coming out of a smaller tire, you just have to remember that the motor is actually what's going to be pushing that power out. It'll be easier for a lot of bikes with higher motors and smaller tires to get off the line a lot faster, but the rotations will be so much faster that your higher speeds may be a little lower. And of course, that all depends on the maker and how they actually set things up. But that's going to be the first thing, is you're going to notice the bigger the tire, the more cushion that you'll be getting off of your rides out there. But again, you can soften these tires quite a bit as much, and then they can actually be going. Now, the reason why you might want to consider a fat tire bike versus a regular road bike is also the versatility to be able to go in sand and snow if you plan to do that. Just keep in mind, the wider the tire you have here, the more drag you're actually going to have on the road. So it does affect the speed of the bike. If comfort is going to be the biggest thing that you want to have in consideration, I would highly recommend starting with a fat tire. They might start up a little higher, but there are some very, very good economical bikes like the Lectric XP, of course. Right now, the Lectric 2.0 is out and it's coming with 3-inch wide tires, And according to what I've been reading in reviews, a lot of people say they don't really feel the difference as far as the softness and the comfort of the ride being lessened by having a 3-inch wide tire. But the one thing they are gaining is the versatility or the mobility, the maneuverability as well. I mean, so what you'll get when you have a thinner tire is, because there's less friction on the road, you can actually turn it faster, move it faster. And these tires are something that you want to go ahead and take a look at and consider what size of a bike that do you really want. Now, of course, the other thing of the benefit that I have of these two models is we actually have a bike that folds. So do you want a bike that actually it needs to be compact and be put aside where you can fold it up and stick it maybe even in the trunk? It actually fits in the trunk of a Camry. I have a video that I made on that if you want to look back through some of the other videos that I made. It does fit in a Camry trunk. It also fits easily in any SUV, just folding it up, stick it on there. And whereas something like this, if you want to take it somewhere, you're probably going to have to get a rack mounted to a car or truck, or a bed of a truck to stick it in the bed of a truck or something like that. It's going to be a lot harder, or maybe even a van. That's going to be the way you're going to be transporting this if you need to take it further away. So there's that other aspect of what is your needs, and that's what you're going to really have to decide. Do I want a folding bike? Do I not? I mean, if you take a look at my e-bike den here, this is actually my garage, and this is the width of the garage. So with a car and the bike in it, it makes it really, really tight. For us to get the bike in and out, I actually have to move the cars out a lot of times. It's something to keep in mind. If you live in an apartment, you're gonna have to take your bike upstairs. Then a folding bike might actually even be a better thing to think about. If you have stairs to go up and down, then a Fat Tire bike may not be a good option because of how thick or heavy that they are. You might want to get a smaller commuter style bike, and maybe one that doesn't even have to fold. It's just light enough so you can carry up and maybe hang it on a wall, and they have wall mounts as well. So that's going to be another thing to really think about, is the not only foldability, but the comfort, the maneuverability on top of that. I mean, how comfortable are you on a bike? They actually add a lot of stability having fat tires, so that's one thing you want to keep in mind, that it's a lot of fun. And the only way, I mean, I'm going to be honest, the only real way to know about the differences before you buy is to try. And I would highly recommend seeing if there's any bike rental shops. I also made another video on that to be able to test it. There's shops that I found that actually have bikes that have 20-inch fat tire, like the Pedigo, and it also had a Rad Rover, and I was able to rent both of them to try them out as well. But let's start with the front of the bike, and then we'll move our way back. And I want to start with the brakes. So this is where you're going to see a pretty big variation in quality of brakes and stopping power. Now what you're seeing here is the Blackbird's brake system for the front, and it has a huge 200+ millimeter disc, and it's a hydraulic brake. Now the hydraulic brake means that there's actually an oil in there, there's pistons that actually will grab, there's 4 pistons that grab both sides of the tire, and it makes it really soft for you to grab the brakes, and the bike starts to stop immediately with very little pressure. Very nice to have with a bike this size. The stopping power is fantastic. The bigger the disc, the slower the friction is going around, so that when the pads grab the disc, there's not as much speed for it to slow down because it's a wider around. Now with something this small and a bike this small, this has more than adequate stopping power. So just keep that in mind. I believe this is a 160 millimeter rotor on it, and with this going, if you have a bike going at 20 miles an hour, yes, it might be better to have a hydraulic brake, but it is more than adequate to go ahead and stop the bike quickly. With, as you know, the rotors being small, but the tires are being smaller as well, it can stop it really adequately. Mechanical brakes are adequate, otherwise they wouldn't be using them. But that's something to also realize, that is one thing that will raise the price of a bike, is hydraulic versus mechanical brakes. And there is a difference in how well the bike will stop and how well they feel. So just keep that in mind. We have also the same brake system in the back, and then on the Lectric XP also there we have their brake system there. But again, mechanical brakes, they work great. You can still stop good, and I don't have a problem with jumping either or. And a side note, I actually ride these bikes 50-50. I actually rotate between the two to keep them running, to keep the batteries, making sure that if I charge up the battery, I'm going to actually bring it back down and not keeping it fully charged sitting around, because that's not good for the battery. But I do have fun on either one, that I will jump on either one. It doesn't, when I need to run my errands when I get home from work, Whatever bike I used yesterday, I'll just use the other. So that's one thing I also do with this. Now the other thing that the folding bike has is also folding pedals that it comes with. You can always install that on any bike that you want, but being that this is a folding bike, they added that on as well. Another thing that we're going to be talking about is the battery sizes. But before we go on to that, let's talk about both of these bikes actually have headlights, and they're both integrated, meaning that they actually do pull power off the main battery cell. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn this on. If I hold the up button, and you see that it turns on there. Okay. The Lectric XP has the exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on. When the power goes on, if I hold the up button, it has there. So you can see both lights are adequate for actually visibility as far as from other cars seeing you. I don't know if I would say both lights are bright enough to actually ride around for you to be able to see, which is why I have something like this up here. These Vaunt lights are fantastic. So they both have it, but they're also pulling power. They don't need to be recharged separately. It's all pulling power from the actual battery itself. That's a big deal because there are actually bikes that don't have lights, and you might want to consider that. Now, another thing I want to show you is that both of these bikes have rear lights. I know we're jumping, but since we're talking about lights, when the bike is on, the rear lights are working. The difference is, so you can see the light back there, but I would like to go ahead and point out, if I squeeze the brake, there is no change in the light in the back. So it just stays. It's not really a brake light. Is it necessary? No. But there are bikes, some of the more higher premium, that you spend a little more, and if you notice, the light does actually, the reflection off the back of the wall, there's an extra pair of lights that actually go on and turn on when I pull the brake. So this actually, both brake handles turn on the brakes. And again, a premium bike, you'll pay for, you'll get a little more of these type of features. Is it necessary? No. Because if you're on a bike trail, does really somebody need you to know that you're slowing down? Well, it might be helpful for them, but they'll see it. But if you're driving a lot on the street, it's something that you might want to consider. I know Juiced came out with their new Step-thru, the Rip Current S. That battery that's actually in the tail light is not integrated, and you would have to change it out periodically here and there. Now they said it was so that if you ever run out of battery, your light will still work, but I'd rather have an integrated light that I didn't have to worry about ever changing the battery, because what if you're riding and the tail light battery wears out before the main battery? Then it kind of leaves you even in worse shape when you're riding without a light on the back. So anyway, that being said, that's the parts of the lighting system that sometimes you'll have an upgrade on depending on the type of bike that you're getting, and you might want to consider, because it is something that is pointed out often, that the lights are integrated or not, and if the brake lights are actually working. So something that you might want to put on your list as a next added feature. So the next thing is, let's talk about the front suspension, because this is a big part. As you can see, this fork here, this is called an inverted fork, and this is actually a premium type fork. It's kind of a design or style that's used in motorcycles, and you know, it gives a better response to suspension. This is what's called an air-filled fork, where you actually have to pump up air if you to adjust it, and it uses the air to make sure that it doesn't like bounce up and down and spring. And the other thing about it is that it's just a stronger fork, and it works great. I really like it. Some of these forks will actually have what's called lockouts, because a lot of times, like when I used to have a mountain bike and I was riding, when I was pedaling, the shocks would be going up and down with me pedaling, and it absorbed all of my power. And then you're actually spending a lot more power trying to get the bike faster, because a lot of it is being expended into the shock, taking up your power. So you want to have like a lockout on it. Now this particular fork doesn't have a lockout, but it does have an adjustment on the bottom underneath that can actually tighten up the amount of air pressure that's going to be going through, so that it can almost work like a lockout on there. But for the most part, like I said, added to the Fat Tire with a front suspension like this on it really makes the road feel like you're riding on clouds. It's pretty awesome on what you get off of something like this. Now, this here is the Lectric 1.0. The new one that's out there actually now has an oil-filled shock. So it's not just a spring-loaded shock, it is actually a higher grade than the spring-loaded. It's not the most expensive like an inverted, but you don't need one really on something like this. They actually got the best fork value for their buck, really. I mean, honestly, the only thing that I would actually say that I really wanted to potentially change on this bike, if I really were to upgrade it, would be to get the fork, because I did add a suspension seat post to soften, and a seat of course as well, to soften the bounce that's actually on the back side. But on the front side, you do feel it a lot in your arms, and you know, your arms and your hands. If you take it on like fire trails or those dirt trails that are where cars can go on it but it's not paved, and you can feel every little bump if you don't have your tires softened. So you know, I like to actually have my tire on this particular bike fully inflated almost to the top, maybe just a couple pressure pounds less, because I want to get the most out of the speed of the bike. You know, I mean, that's just the way this one goes fast enough anyway. I want to get the softer ride. I actually soften the tires a little bit more, but I think I'm going to start hardening them. I don't need to have it as soft, especially with the softer seats that I already have on it. I do pedal quite a bit as well, so that's another part of that. Now, talking about pedaling, with regard to the Lectric XP, you do still get a good pedal cadence that you can actually get off of this bike and, you know, keep it going, but it's not necessarily as exercise friendly as it is on a bike that's going to be larger like this, where you have a real feel of the bike that you're actually going through. So I just want to have you keep that in mind as well. The design of a 20-inch, it may not be as fun if you are someone who loves to pedal and are used to riding bikes. You definitely want to try it out, because you may find that, hey, it's cool, it can do this, but as you get used to the bike and you might want to do a little more pedaling, get more exercise, you can definitely do that on the XP. Don't get me wrong. Okay, you can do that. It's just not as comfortable as something like a full-size bike. And that's just my opinion on that. I'd love to hear some of your other comments on there, those who are listening on this part, what you think about that comment on there. At this point, let's go ahead and we're going to move over to some more of the electricals and also the top part and the handlebars and what we have here next. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging in this far. At this point, we're going to be taking the break of part 1, and there's going to be still part 2 and part 3 coming up. We're going to be covering still the motor, the controls, the different aspects of the height of the bike, the frame size, everything else that we still have to go ahead and do a complete comparison between the two bikes, and something that, you know, you might decide you might want on your bike, so you can start really getting a good idea of what's out there. We're going to be covering the sensors, the torque versus the cadence sensor, and all that stuff. There's a lot of good stuff still coming on. You know, keep an eye out for part 2 and part 3. We're going to have those right after these are put together. Should be in the playlist. Be sure to subscribe, to like this. If you have found this to be of any benefit whatsoever, I'd love to hear your comments. If I'm wrong on certain things, if there's certain things that you just want to know more about, in case I missed it, you know, part 2 and 3 are still coming up, so you're going to be able to get more information and the rest of the backside of the bike from the top to the bottom as well. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us on this one, and I'll see you in part 2.